I'm excited to bring to the conversation Stacey Mitchell, co-director at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and author of the book Big Box Swindle. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
Pleasure. I had occasion to stumble on your Twitter thread where you like so succinctly in a couple of tweets summarize what I've been noticing in so many cities everywhere I travel. Here in the city of Atlanta, there are just so many vacant lots. And I see also on the other side, I see Amazon warehouses popping up everywhere. And I'm wondering if in the next 20 years, these cities that are taking in all the new corporations are going to be saddled with the same empty vacant lot scenario that you spoke about on Twitter. Could you tell us about your work and kind of address it from the frame of that question?
That's right. I mean, so many communities have been taken in by the promises of these big corporations, whether it's big box retailers like Walmart or more recently Amazon. We're going to bring you lots of jobs, we're going to bring you lots of tax revenue. And years later, after the growth of all these big box stores, what we see is lots of communities have just been hollowed out. They've lost their local businesses. Those big box stores haven't delivered on the promises, even if they're still operating. Some of them have gone vacant. They haven't delivered the jobs that they promised, and they really haven't delivered the tax revenue. It turns out there's a whole hidden cost associated with these stores, and now many of those companies are demanding tax breaks and lower property valuations on their stores. And so it's really it's been a bit of a swindle that communities have gone down this route. And so part of my tweet thread was really to say, we should be looking at this more holistically, and especially as we've got Amazon building warehouses, we should learn some lessons from the past.
Yeah, I'm looking at I'm thinking of the city of South Fulton, which I had an occasion to meet a candidate for commissioner in that city. And we spoke specifically about this, right? We spoke about the
Mhm.
promises that are made by corporations in the form of we're going to bring jobs. And so our local city council or whatever city council you're a part of or you're in, they hear these corporations say, we're going to bring jobs. And then the mayor gets a chance to do a big presentation and say, we brought Amazon to our city, or in this case, or your specific case is, Lowe's in this photo that we're looking at. We brought Lowe's
Mhm.
to our city, but now Lowe's is an empty vacant lot that is a liability to the city. And please tell us more about that swindle where the tax revenues that they thought we were going to get never really came.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of these big stores opened over community opposition. You had local people saying, we want to keep our local businesses. We want to have a healthy neighborhood business district. And yet city officials were just drawn in by that tax argument. And so they okayed like a lot of this development. Some is okay, but they okayed a lot of it. And what we're seeing now is all of these companies are going around state after state, and what they're doing is systematically contesting their property valuations. They're saying our buildings are worth half, a third as much as you're saying they're worth, and we want to get a big cut in our property tax bill. They're doing it under something that's called the dark store theory, which is it's as nefarious as it sounds. They're essentially saying to cities, you should value our building as though it's empty, as though it's not a going concern with a bunch of sales and revenue going on in the building, but instead you should treat it as though it's like a decrepit, vacant building, and that should be the value. And they're getting away with it in a lot of states, though there is now some pushback and there's some legislation that maybe could stop them. But the end result for cities is that they have often seen local businesses disappear, which has gotten rid of property tax revenue that was coming in from those businesses. They've seen higher costs for services for these stores. These stores generate a lot of police calls, a lot of road maintenance. And then now those stores themselves are slashing their property tax payments. So that the end result is that these businesses are really hurting cities financially in a significant way.
Mm. And you're telling me, I want to make sure I heard correctly. You said that there's an argument that's being made by these corporations that we should value their decrepit, broken down blight on our cities that are the empty parking lots of their big boxes.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually saying that those stores that are in operation, stores that are doing tens of millions of dollars of business every year, should be valued as though they're vacant. And the argument that they're making is that these
Oh,
are single purpose buildings that if Walmart leaves the building, it's got no other use, and therefore it has no value, which is, of course, exactly the opposite of what they told cities 10
got
years
you.
ago when they wanted to build. They were like, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing, and we're going to add all this,
Got
tax
you.
base. And
Okay.
now they're saying we're worthless. And in fact, we've got empty buildings all over the country. So you can see that we're really worthless and that nobody wants to occupy these buildings.
So it's even worse
Right.
than I thought.
Yeah,
They're trying to prove
exactly.
the
And it's a
point.
scandal, I mean,
Mm,
there are towns they're doing this in Michigan. They've started doing it here in Maine. They've done it all over the Midwest, and they have gotten big tax cuts. And in some cases, there's usually a state tax board that this goes through. The state tax board has actually made the local city or town write the company a check for back taxes, like basically taxes they had
wow.
paid in previous years. Now you've got a
Wow.
struggling city government, and then they're having to cut services, libraries, schools, everything else is having to pay the price so that Walmart can walk out with a big check for taxes that it paid in previous years.
Mm. In addition to the public subsidizing of these corporations in the form of food stamps, any type of assistance, because these corporations aren't necessarily paying their workers a living wage. So not only are we getting stuck with the bag or with the hot potato, seems to be my
Yeah.
phrase for today, as cities, because they're skipping town, proving a point that we have to keep them. It is so convoluted and nefarious. I want to just hold the pin there and ask you about some cities, some states that got it right. You said Vermont is a state that got it right. Tell us about.
Yeah, Vermont has a law. It's called Act 250, and it's a statewide law. It's a land use law, and it essentially says if you want to build something large, whether it's a big commercial development, big housing development, then there has to be an analysis about whether the costs of that, whether the benefits of it are going to outweigh the costs. Like they really do the math. Like, how is this going to play out over time? And what is it going to generate in terms of jobs, revenue, good economic activity? And then what are going to be the costs? Are we going to lose businesses in other parts of the community? Or are they going to go out? Are we going to lose tax revenue? How much is this going to cost in services? I mean, they do a full scale analysis, and they do it at the regional level. So it's
Mm,
not just about the host community, but all of the surrounding communities also participate in that. And it's about the impact that it might have on them as well. And because of that, what you've seen in Vermont, and there are a few other places that have similar policies, people get the full picture. Like in the case of big box retail, back in the 90s, 2000, when those retailers were building lots of stores, Vermont was actually doing the analysis, and in many cases
mm,
coming back and saying, you know what, this is actually going to cost more. And this isn't going to deliver the promises that these companies are making. And when people saw that information clearly, what they then did was say no to those stores. So today, Vermont has far fewer big box stores. It's an option. There are 5 Walmarts in the state, and it's an available option for people, but it's not the level of saturation that you see everywhere else. And in turn, Vermont has more small businesses per capita than any other state. So they've really avoided the big box swindle and had a more diverse and productive local economy as a result.
could you talk about our level of complicity as individuals with
Mm.
our level of consumerism and our incessant need to buy widgets? How are we complicit with this type of life?
Yeah, it's on the one hand, I think that it is really worth thinking about like where your dollars go. And, even that exercise is a great way to like learn about sort of how our economy works or doesn't work, right? Is to just pay attention. And there are in many places, there are great local businesses that give back, that are good employers, that need your dollars. And I would just encourage people to sort of seek out those businesses and support them because they really do need you. On the other hand, I would also say that I think we need to see this as a product of public policy, that we have implemented policies at the local, state, and federal level that have favored and encouraged the consolidation of economic power by these big companies, whether it's Amazon or Walmart. We've said, you don't have to pay federal taxes. We've created all sorts of loopholes that only work for big business. We've created land use policies that favor this kind of development. I mean, the list goes on and on of ways in which we have actively encouraged their growth and undermined more community-based alternatives through public policy. And ultimately, it's public policy that's going to change this. And so, on the one hand, I want people to be mindful of where they're shopping and spending, and that's important. But I also really feel like it's our citizen muscle that's the most
Mm,
powerful muscle, and we need to
yes.
like learn how to use that and learn how to use policy to structure the economy in ways that actually work for people.
Absolutely. One final question for you with the time that we have left. In your book or in your research, have you found a larger concentration of empty big box stores in any particular subgroup? And I guess I could point, I don't
Mm,
see a lot of empty stores in wealthy neighborhoods, and I see
right.
a lot of empty stores in Black neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, what you see with these big chains, and it's not just the, sort of big boxes like Walmart, but it's also the pharmacy chains, CVS and Walgreens, all of these chain companies is, during flush times, they will expand and they will push the envelope. But then when they decide to close stores, where is it that they close? It's always communities of color, low income communities that they pull out of. They have very little commitment to communities in general, but particularly to communities of color. And there is a just sort of willingness to mistreat people
Mm,
that you see in terms of their development patterns. And it just really comes back, I think, again to, well, how is it that we build businesses and institutions that are really rooted in community and owned by people in the community, and therefore have a vested interest in the long-term interests of the community. And for too long we've been on this like bigger is better,
mm,
kind of approach. And the reason my organization, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, exists is to sort of question that and say, what would it look like if we did economic development in a different way that was really about something that's more community based and community rooted.
mm. And it sounds like Vermont might have a model. It sounds like businesses shouldn't come from the top down any more than government should come from the top down, but should come from the bottom up, from a local level up. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us and all the work that you're doing. The title of the book is Big Box Swindle. Stacey Mitchell, co-director at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.